I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. Young people go on an annual pilgrimage right here in New York.
Not many people can go on a pilgrimage. Not many people can go to Santiago de Compostela. Not many people can go to Israel. You know, why not bring a pilgrimage here to New York City?
Plus, if you have not done so yet, today is the day to go to confession. And it's weekend March Madness closer to home.
March Madness would have to be like a time where all the youth comes together. Well, it's mostly based around sports, but we just come together, we start bonding.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Well, it's a time of year when many think even more deeply about their faith. Yesterday, churches in Brooklyn, Queens, and around the world celebrated Palm Sunday and read the Lord's Passion, marking the beginning of Holy Week. Now, during this time, many Christians like to get closer to their faith by getting away and taking a pilgrimage. And while places like Jerusalem, Lourdes, and Guadalupe are popular and meaningful destinations for many, taking such a long trip just isn't possible. So for the third time in as many years, the Cathedral of St. Patrick's Young Adults sponsored a pilgrimage right here in the city, walking from the top of Manhattan to the bottom, visiting churches along the way. And as in previous years, we were there.
The Lord will rejoice to always have us walking with him. It's not we're always going to walk perfectly. We will sometimes stumble and fall, sprain our ankles, literal and spiritual.
Today, what's taking place here is our third annual pilgrimage of New York City. We started at 9:30 this morning, actually, at the shrine of St. Francis Xavier Cabrini on West 191st Street in Fort Washington. And we still have a long way to go to reach our final destination, which is St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, which is right in the southern tip of Manhattan.
We know that pilgrimages are very old, long-standing tradition. It's a wonderful opportunity, as I say, for fellowship, for expressing our faith in Almighty God and in His Son, Jesus Christ.
This year's pilgrimage is Jesuit-themed, which is why we're all visiting Jesuit churches. We've decided to visit the Church of St. Aloysius Gonzaga, the Church of St. Ignatius Loyola, St. Patrick's Cathedral, the Church of St. Francis Xavier, and we always end the pilgrimage down at the shrine of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton.
It is a hard journey. It's a lot of walking. Your knees hurt, your legs hurt, your feet hurt, but you offer it up for your Lenten journey. And not many people can go on a pilgrimage. Not many people can go to Santiago de Compostela. Not many people can go to Israel. Why not bring a pilgrimage here to New York City?
One of the things I found, though, is the truest sense of pilgrimage can be achieved in Manhattan because you go through so many different neighborhoods, so many different ethnic groups, so many different pavement styles and grounds and things like that. So it fits pretty well with the pilgrimage idea.
We're literally praying with our feet. It's very much in the model of what Jesus did, walking all over Galilee, spreading the good news. These people, just by their presence walking down the streets of New York, are saying something about their own commitment to the church, to their own commitment to Christ. Also, there's a sense of fellowship that grows up between people, and you get people telling their stories, their faith stories, their life stories. And so when we gather at each of these stops, there's a sense of more and more we are praying together as a community.
We're a little over halfway. It's good, a little tired, but it's good. I'm having fun.
We'll walk, we'll talk, and then we'll say a prayer, and we'll continue walking, kind of enjoying the city, but including the prayer as well. I think that's what makes it easier to do.
The different parishes went to share the history, gave us information about the church, the history. That's also very special. And just meeting people, that's very touching also. Very spiritual experience.
I've reached the destination. It's 9 hours. It feels like coming home, and it's a nice end to the day.
This year there was over 250 people walking. I mean, I think that's a wonderful, it's a wonderful accomplishment, and people come from all over the place.
We can choose to have our pilgrimage for but one day or for a lifetime. We can have spent a wonderful day in the New York sunshine, or we can have a wonderful lifetime walking with Christ among his people, witnessing to the power that is Christ in our lives.
And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Cuba's government responds to Pope Benedict's request. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Coming up later, it may not be the national stage, but just as exciting for some young people in Brooklyn and Queens hitting the hardwood on Final Four weekend. More on that in a bit, but first, a look at the day's headlines. Well, it has been nearly a week since Pope Benedict bid farewell to Cuba, and the profound effects of the Holy Father's trip still linger. The Cuban government has announced that this coming Good Friday will be a one-time national holiday in the country. The decision comes in response to Benedict's request to Cuban President Raul Castro. Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi saying the Holy See hopes that the visit of the Holy Father will continue to bring the desired fruits for the good of the Church and all Cubans. Now, this is not the first time that the Cuban government has honored the wishes of a visiting pope. The Christmas holiday was reinstated in 1998 after Pope John Paul II's specific request to then-President Fidel Castro during the pontiff's historic visit to Cuba. No word yet on whether the holiday will become permanent. That decision depends on the Communist Party. And the mystery man who yelled anti-government slogans just before a mass celebrated by Pope Benedict in Cuba has been identified. Jose Daniel Ferrer, a Cuban dissident, told the Associated Press that the protester's name is Andres Carrion Alvarez. The 38-year-old resident of the eastern city of Santiago de Cuba shouted, "Down with the revolution, down with dictatorship," near journalists at the mass at Santiago's crowded Revolution Plaza last Monday before being whisked away by security. The government has no comment, but a spokesperson for Benedict said the pontiff was aware of the incident and concerned about that man's welfare. Well, from the Vatican, those gathered for Palm Sunday Mass yesterday rang in Holy Week with Pope Benedict. Rome Reports has more on that.
At the end of the celebrations for Palm Sunday, the Pope recited the Angelus with those gathered in St. Peter's Square. He began by greeting a number of young people who had traveled to Rome and were helping to plan for the next World Youth Day in Brazil.
Today is Palm Sunday. As we remember our Lord's welcome into Jerusalem, I am pleased to greet all of you, especially the many young people who have come here to pray with me.
Benedict XVI was dressed in his red vestment, which is traditional for Palm Sunday. He then spoke about the importance of Holy Week as it leads to the celebration of Easter.
The Holy Week may we be moved again by Christ's passion and death, put our sins behind us, and with God's grace choose a life of love and service to our brethren. God's blessing upon you.
During Holy Week, tens of thousands of pilgrims arrive in Rome to take part in the celebrations. One of the most spectacular events is the Via Crucis that is held at the Colosseum on Good Friday and presided over by the Pope.
And elsewhere, it's not mega millions, but there is still immeasurable value in Pope Benedict's donation to a local Catholic church in Syria. According to Vatican Radio, Benedict has given $100,000 through the Pontifical Council Cor Unum to help the church, which is active in charitable work throughout Syria, especially in the area of Homs and Aleppo. Now, the Holy Father has repeatedly appealed for the end of violence in Syria and has called for dialogue and reconciliation between those involved in the conflicts in view of peace and the common God. And back in this country, the widow of the U.S. Senate's liberal lion is persona non grata at one Catholic college. Anna Maria College in Paxton, Massachusetts, has rescinded its invitation to Victoria Reggie Kennedy, the wife of the late Senator Ted Kennedy. She was scheduled to speak and receive an honorary degree at the college's spring commencement. The school said its board of trustees made the decision after Worcester Bishop Robert McManus raised concerns. Now, the school did not specify what those concerns were. A spokesman for the Worcester Diocese says the bishop was upholding the U.S. Bishops' Conference directive that schools should not honor people who act in defiance of the church's fundamental moral principles. Victoria Kennedy has publicly supported abortion rights and same-sex marriage, positions in direct opposition to what the Catholic Church teaches. Well, parishioners of a small Illinois farming community displaced and its pastor removed after what appears to be the priest's controversial decision. According to reports, Belleville Diocese Bishop Edward Braxton informed parishioners that the Reverend John Marie Monji, an international priest on loan from West Africa, will be removed for an undetermined amount of time without offering a reason for that decision. Long-standing parishioners and critics of Monji say he did not allow American flags in the church, and that is part of the reason why he may have been asked to leave. Now, beginning the weekend after Easter, the parish's approximately 450 parishioners will have to attend church elsewhere, at least for a while, according to Bishop Braxton. Now, I should mention, the church report website notes that just hours after Monji left, the flags were placed back in the church in opposite corners near the altar and were in place during the 5 p.m. Mass on Saturday. From Ireland, it's lay Catholics speaking out on behalf of their church. Rome Reports has that story.
In recent months, there's been high tensions between the government of Ireland and the Vatican. In fact, since November of 2011, Ireland doesn't have a resident ambassador to the Holy See.
They felt that this was something with a stroke of a pen. We'll close this embassy and no one will really protest or no one will really mind.
It turns out thousands of Irish Catholics did mind. Shortly after the closure was announced, a lay movement called Stand Up was created. Some of its members visited Rome recently, where once again they called for full diplomatic relations to be reestablished.
A young mother in Dublin felt compelled to stand up, and that's where she got the name Ireland Stand Up.
It's very important to say that this isn't an initiative of the hierarchy or an initiative of the institutional church. This is ordinary Catholics who are very concerned about the treatment of their church. They're very concerned that this is a symbol from the government of a frosting of relations with the Holy See.
With these postcards, as shown on their website, IrelandStandUp.org, the group is promoting the 50th International Eucharistic Congress, which will be held in Dublin from June 10th to the 17th. So far, they've gotten the attention of everyday Catholics and also government officials who also support the cause.
Everyone in the church in Ireland hopes will be a unique opportunity for renewal for the church, I guess at an institutional level, but also at a personal level for one's individual faith.
In the summer of 2011, Ireland's Prime Minister, Enda Kenny, publicly criticized the Vatican for the way it handled cases of sex abuse, as shown in the Cloyne report. Shortly after, the government announced it would close its embassy to the Holy See to save roughly €400,000.
We must be very frank and very honest about this. The terrible crimes of abuse and cover-up have gone on in the church, and we need to face that reality. But I think many lay people feel that some politicians are cynically using the suffering of those who have been abused to score political points against the church.
How important our links with the Holy See are that go back over 1,500 years, our diplomatic links and our historical links, and the fact that the Vatican was one of the first and oldest states to recognize Ireland's statehood in 1929.
Michael Kelly says without communication, the mistrust between both states will only increase. Even though their relationship is still tense, he's hopeful things will change in the near future.
And back in New York, today we wish a very happy birthday to Cardinal Edward Egan, the New York Archdiocese retired Archbishop. Egan turns 80, and it's more than just a milestone. He is now no longer eligible to vote in a conclave to elect a new pope. Only cardinals who are younger than 80 can do so. A little history for you. Egan was named New York's Archbishop in 2000. Pope John Paul II elevated him to cardinal in 2001. Pope Benedict accepted his resignation as Archbishop of New York in 2009 and named Archbishop Timothy Dolan as his successor. Dolan was elevated to cardinal in February of this year. And today also marks the 7th anniversary of the death of Pope John Paul II. It was on this day back in 2005 that the bells of St. Peter rang to announce John Paul's death. He died after a long battle with Parkinson's disease and following a reign that lasted more than 26 years. That is the second longest in history. Well, stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, some say it's a sacrament that's not used enough, and today is the day to change that. Welcome back. It's become a tradition in Catholic churches across New York City. On the Monday of Holy Week, parishes in the Diocese of Brooklyn, Rockville Center, and the Archdiocese of New York remain open for confession from 3 to 9 p.m. Now, the extended hours give people an opportunity to take advantage of a sacrament that some say is underutilized. This, of course, could seem daunting, going to church and revealing your sins out loud to a priest, but it's not as scary as you might think. It's actually much more than just reciting every bad thing that you've done. To paraphrase one author, the more you practice confession, the easier it becomes. I had a chance to talk with that author, Paul Wilkes, whose book, The Art of Confession, was released last year by Workman Publishing. He joined me by phone earlier today. And Paul, as you know, we are in the Lenten season, just days away from Easter Sunday. We've had almost 40 days to do our due diligence in the confessional. Now, this is the perfect time to start anew, but why do so many wait for a special occasion to confess?
Liz, I don't honestly know. For me, I believe that confession is a moment-by-moment opportunity to really correct our not-so-good behavior and to reinforce our good behavior. For me, personally, I do it every night. I confess every night on my knees. What kind of day has this been? When was I a decent person? When was I not? Because I think that unless we do it on a daily and it becomes just a natural habit, that we then kind of lapse into bad habits. For instance, let me take an example. Okay, so my wife has just had surgery. She's had a knee replacement. So if I'm a little impatient with her, you know, she's in pain and I've got to do all the work. And so if I catch myself kind of snapping at her, well, if I don't catch that, I'll do it again, and I'll do it again, and I'll do it again. But if I say to myself in my own personal confession, hey, Paul, that wasn't really the best thing to do right there. This kid's in pain, and you ought to try to help her instead of being impatient, I'll correct my actions immediately. So having it one day a year, or even one day a week, or even one day a month, is for me, is not enough.
And that contemplation, as you mentioned, is really important. Now, I have your book here, The Art of Confession, and guilt, a big issue you raise in the book, saying we hide from our deepest, darkest secrets. How do we free ourselves from the bonds of guilt in order to make a truly meaningful confession, whether we're at home or with a priest?
Well, first of all, Liz, guilt is okay. But guilt is like basil. You want to sprinkle a little over the top of a recipe. You don't want to you don't eat basil sandwiches. So guilt is all right. I raised two boys, and I wanted them to feel guilty at times, okay? Mm-hmm. But think about God. Look, here he is, created us, loves us, gave us a free will, always forgiving, died on the cross. Do you think he wants us to carry that cross around? I mean, my theology is logical. I mean, if this is a loving God, guilt is not, he didn't tell us to feel guilty. He just said, hey, do the best you can. That's his philosophy. That was Jesus' way when he walked the face of the earth. Come on, Liz, you can do that one better. Come on, Paul, you can do that one better. He didn't say, boy, you better really feel guilty about this. You are a terrible person. How could a father say that about a son or daughter? I don't think so.
And I agree, that is a very important approach to it. And also, you also describe confession not just as an act, but as an attitude, a state of mind. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Well, if you confess on a nightly basis, as I do, or periodically, it becomes kind of like, I look at it as a cast that you put on a broken bone, that, you know, you need the cast on there for a while so that the bone heals, but then the bone is healed and you can take the cast off. Well, if confession becomes an attitude where you're doing it kind of all the time, you don't have to wait for once a year or once a month. It becomes a natural part of your life where you're analyzing yourself. And I don't mean this, you know, with your teeth clenched and your eyeballs bulging out of your head, saying, "Oh my God, have I done that wrong? Have I done that wrong? Am I doing this right?" No, just in a relaxed fashion, saying, well, what kind of action was that? Did I treat? How was I on that interview with Liz today? Was I truthful? Was I a wise guy? How was I? And you know, Mayor Koch had a great thing. One of the former mayors of New York. How am I doing? Well, I think that's what we ought to say to ourselves during the day. How am I doing? Am I being decent? And what do we feel good about? We don't feel good about sneaking in front of that person in a parking place and getting it. We feel good about waving at them and say, go ahead, take it. I'll get another spot. If we just think about that during the day, it becomes an attitude naturally.
And Paul, you know what? It feels like it's been many, many years, and I won't say how many since I made my first confession. So obviously, times have changed. Now, you say that the book makes the practice of confession a little bit more contemporary. In what way?
Well, in the old days, confession used to be that Saturday afternoon exercise, the laundry list. I disobeyed my mother 4 times. I missed prayers before and after meals 3 times. And it never really got to the essence of our habits that were good or not good. In other words, am I a disobedient person? Am I a prayerful person? That's really what confession and reconciliation is about today. It's not trying to detail, 4 times this, 3 times that, 9 times that. It's more about what kind of person am I? Am I angry all the time? Am I impatient all the time? Am I uncharitable all the time? Because I think that's what God is looking at. He's not I don't think he's a bookkeeper. I don't think he's got a big Excel sheet on everybody up at the sky. I take Holy Communion to the hospital here in Wilmington, North Carolina, and people say, oh, I can't communion, I can't receive, I'm so guilty, I did this. And I have a little joke. I says, look, God is very, very old, and he has a very bad memory. He's already forgotten what you're worried about. Go forth. He loves you. He wants to bring you into his house and sit you down and have a nice dinner and talk with you. Don't think about the guilt, because God is not. We're doing that to ourselves. God isn't doing it to us.
All right, Paul, thank you. That's the perfect last word. And as you say in your book, hopefully confession helps us reconnect with the deepest, best part of ourselves. Thank you once again for joining us.
Liz, thank you. Wonderful to be on with you in Brooklyn. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, Catholic churches across the Diocese of Brooklyn, Rockville Center, and the Archdiocese of New York are open until 9 p.m. on Monday night for those who want to go to confession. Stay tuned. There's more Currents ahead. When we return, Kentucky and Kansas may be facing off tonight, but young people from Brooklyn and Queens have their own version of March Madness.
Everyone loves to brag that whether Queens or Brooklyn is better, but we do incorporate fellowship because we're all friends, as I said before.
And finally tonight, it was the eve of what is a very solemn week for Catholics and other Christians, a festive atmosphere in New Orleans. And no, it wasn't Mardi Gras. That's where the NCAA's Final Four games were played this weekend. Now, in case you missed it, Kansas and Kentucky came out the winners. They're facing off tonight to decide the champion. Much closer to home, a basketball tournament also took place, but it was not the national championship that was on the line, and it wasn't New Orleans. At St. Clair's Parish in Rosedale, it was a friendly rivalry of Brooklyn versus Queens in an event hosted by the Vicariate for Black Catholic Concerns Youth Leadership Ambassador Program.
March Madness would have to be like a time where all the youth comes together. Well, it's mostly based around sports, but we just come together, we start bonding, and we just talk about the times that we've had without each other, because we did go to Kajanga over the summer. So we come together, tell everybody about our past year. We just basically reminisce about old times and create new memories.
And this is the second year we're doing it. We try to get as many people. It's fun. Hopefully not too much competition, but sometimes you can't help that. But it's really a fun event to get the youth together.
Well, so being from Queens for myself and being in Brooklyn for a year, but I'm going to have to root for my Queens boys out here tonight.
I'd have to root for Brooklyn because I'm originally from Brooklyn, and I think they're going to win. I've seen a lot of them play, and they're really good.
Oh, well, in today's society, it's hard to get the youth together, especially in the Catholic spiritual manner. So, having these basketball functions, having a good day with free throw shootouts, 3-point shootouts, I think it's good to bring the youth in. And the late John Paul II said it the best, that the church is young, and it's the best way to go out there, go to Brooklyn, Queens, not just here in this diocese, but any other diocese. Bring the young people together and play simple things, play basketball and build fraternity.
The Queens team won the basketball game. Brooklyn was behind for a large amount of time and came up at the end.
Feels great, you know? Represent Queens.
When we come together here at a basketball game like this, we get to know each other so that when we get ready for an event like Kujanga, where all the different youth group comes together for a weekend, it's a great time, and then we're already past the stage of knowing each other, and we can actually dive into deeper matters of faith.
When people come, it's like a cultural diffusion between, you know, everybody, and it could be any race. It doesn't have to be just one specific Black or American or anything else like that.
Everyone loves to brag that whether Queens or Brooklyn is better, but we do incorporate fellowship because we're all friends, as I said before. There are kids from Brooklyn that are volunteering for the Queens team, knowing that they don't have enough players, so we're really friendly with each other.
Point is not just about winning anyway. It was a nice game. I got to meet a whole bunch of people from Brooklyn, a couple people from Queens too, because some of them going to St. Joseph. But I like the game. I wish we could have more stuff like this and more people to attend it.
And that is all for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, during this Passion Week, a musical portrayal of Christ's final earthly suffering. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. You can also connect with us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faubles. Thank you for watching, and have a good night. I'm Liz Faubles. Tonight on Currents, during Passion Week, an account of Christ's earthly suffering in the form of a musical drama. That and the rest of the day's headlines tonight on Currents.